This is our video for Chapter 2, Lesson 3. This video is all about the percent proportion. So we'll begin with a little bit of vocab. First, if you don't already have the definition of percent written down, you're going to want to write that down. A percent is a ratio out of 100 that compares a part to a whole. Now these words part and whole, they're very important in the percent world, so we need definitions for those as well. The first word is part. Part is the new or changed number in a problem. And whole is the old or the original number in a problem. So we're going to be working on figuring out what number is known as the part and what number is known as the whole. And that takes a little bit of practice. Let's pay attention really closely to the hint that I give you to help you always figure out which number is your whole number. Next thing you want to write down is the percent proportion itself. The percent proportion is part over whole equals percent over 100. I would make a note card for this, a flashcard for this, to study that formula. This proportion will help us solve many percent problems. 2.3 notes. The only note I have for you is this big hint. Sometimes it's hard to figure out which number is the part and which number is the whole. So my hint to you is always search for the phrase percent of the whole. Look for your percent of, that's always going to be in a problem. And whatever comes after that number, or whatever the word percent of, is going to be our whole number. Percent of the whole. You're going to hear me say that a lot today. You should be saying it a lot when you solve these problems yourself. Let's look at our first practice problem. Number 1, what percent of 25 is 20? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down percent, P, and W, because we want to get this information set up and ready to go before we start solving with our proportion. This diagram here, this is to help us understand the problem a little bit better. Okay, so it begins with what percent? What percent? That tells us we do not know the percent. The percent is our unknown, so that's going to be our variable x. Now, we don't always find these two numbers in order. We have to use our clues to figure out which number is the part, which number is the whole. And I'm going to give you a hint. A lot of people think the whole is always going to be the bigger number. That is not true. Use the hint that I gave you in your notes where we look for that phrase, percent of the whole. And that will help us always find the number that is our whole number. So if we find that phrase here, percent of the whole, percent of 25, whatever follows percent of is going to be the whole number in our problem. So down here in our list, we can put 25 as the whole. That leaves one thing left for us to find, and that's the part. And there's only one number left in the problem, and that's 20. So before we start solving this, let's look at a diagram that helps us understand what's going on in the problem. Our whole number is this outside rectangle. The whole thing is the number 25. That would be our whole, so that is the 100% full original number. Now we're focusing on the shaded piece here, and this shaded piece is the 20. That is our part. And we're trying to figure out the percent of 25 that 20 makes up. So we know we don't have the full 100 here because 20 is smaller than 25. That number, that percent, is what we're trying to figure out. What percent of 25 comes from that 20 that we have shaded? So what you are going to do next, and you are always going to do this, you are going to write the proportion. Part over whole equals percent over 100. Part over whole equals percent over 100. Yes, I'm going to look for this every time. Yes, I want to see that proportion written down because the more you write it, the more you will memorize it. So now we take our numbers and we plug them in, we substitute them in to the proportion. So x is our percent, the part is 20, the whole is 25, and this guy right down here is always going to be a 100. Always, always. To solve for our missing variable in that proportion, we can cross multiply. First, we get 25 times x, which is 25x. 20 times 100 is 2,000. and we will do some simple division to isolate our variable. We'll divide both sides by 25, because 25 divided by 25 is 1, and that leaves us with 1x. 20 divided by 25 is, 2,000 divided by 25 is 80. I had a multiplication mistake there. 20 times 100 is 2,000, so please correct that on your paper. 2,000 divided by 25 is 80. Now just a reminder, we check back here, we were solving for the percent. So our answer needs a percent sign after it, because we are answering the question, what percent of 25 is 20? So if we go back to our diagram, 20 is 80% of our whole 25. And if you look at our picture, we have almost the whole rectangle shaded. We're slightly less than the whole thing, which is why 80% is a percent that does make sense for us. Let's look at another one. I'm skipping number 2. You will come back and do number 2 tonight. This is number 3. Number 3 says, what number is 45% of 90? What number? So we're asking for a number this time. When you see what, you know that it's an unknown. You can put an X in its spot. What number? X is 45% of 90. Well, the easiest number to figure out here is our percent, because our percent is followed by a percent sign. So our percent is 45. Now we use that important phrase, percent of the whole, to figure out what our whole number is. Percent of 90, percent of the whole. So 90 is going to be our whole number. And that means the last thing for us to fill in is the part. And the part is this missing number that we are searching for. The part is x. So let's see how that looks in our diagram. The whole number, our whole outside rectangle, is 90. That's our 100%. That's our original unchanged number. Then we want to know, what's this orange box? How much does that represent? That orange box is 45% of the whole, and we're going to try to figure out what number goes along with that 45%. So, write your original proportion, part over whole, equals percent over 100. And we are going to fill it in with our numbers right here. The percent is 45. Bottom right-hand corner is always 100. The part is our missing variable, and the whole is 90. So we can go ahead and cross multiply. We're going to start with 100 times x. 100 times x is 100x. Bring down your equal sign. 90 times 45 is 4,050. If you don't believe me, go ahead and check my math. Pause the video and do the division. We want to isolate the variable, so we're going to divide both sides by 100 to get that x all by itself. 100 divided by 100 is 1, so we're left with 1x equals, shortcut for dividing by 100, move your decimal 2 places to the left. I get 40 5/10. Remember, this time I'm solving for the part, so I don't have to add a percent sign after it. I could just leave my answer as 40 5/10. So if I want to put that back into my diagram here, that means that 40 5/10 is equal to 45% of 90. So we're slightly less than half. 45% is slightly less than 1/2. And if we think about half of 90, that would be 45. So it makes sense that slightly less than half, 45%, would be about 40 5/10. Okay, those are the only two I'm going to solve the whole way for you. I will help you set up number 4 and number 5, but you'll have to finish these on your own. Number 4, 84 is 75% of what number? Well, the first thing I do is I find where it says what number, and I put my variable in that spot. Now I find my percent sign. That means my percent is 75. Remember that important phrase we keep repeating over and over again, percent of the whole, percent of what number, percent of what number. Okay, so my missing number is going to be the whole this time. And the only number left is 84. That means that's the part. You'll notice that we're always finding the part last. The percent is always your easiest to find. The whole is the next easiest because of that phrase, percent of the whole. And the part is kind of what's left for us. Let's take a look at what this looks like in our diagram. This time, we don't know the whole number. We don't know what 100% is. But we do know what 75% is. 75% is equal to 84. So we've got this big number going on. It's going to be bigger than 84. And 75% of that big number is 84. Our job is to find out what that big number is. Okay? So get your proportions set up. Part over whole equals percent over 100. Do your substitution and solve to figure out what our missing number is. What's the whole? You can pause and do that now, or you can keep going with the notes and come back and finish it later. The last problem I'm going to help you with right now is number 5. We're going to set it up together. Colin has 45 alpacas. He has 22 boys and 25 girls. What percent of his alpacas are boys? This time it says what percent? What percent? So that means our percent is the missing number. Our percent is X. Next, we go to our famous hint here, percent of the whole. Percent of the whole, that means his alpacas are the whole number, which means we have to figure out how many alpacas does he have altogether. That's 47. So the whole is all 47 alpacas. Now the part this time is a little trickier. We have a 22 and we have a 25, so we have to read our question one more time to figure out what the part is. What percent of his alpacas are boys? So the part we're focusing on are the boys, not the girls. Sorry girls, we're not going to use that number this time. So the part is the 22 boys. Let's put this into the diagram really quickly. The whole is 47, so all the alpacas are 47. Then we're going to talk about the part that we are focused on is this shaded green part down here, which is 22. And we are trying to figure out what percent those 22 alpacas are out of the whole, which is our 47 or our 100%. So that's how we understand our image. That's how I understand our problem in terms of the diagram. Your job is now to put the information into the proportion and cross multiply to solve, to figure out what percent of those alpacas are made up from the boys. Okay? Right now, you've got several questions to finish. Remember, we started 4 and 5 together. You have to finish those. We skipped number 2. You have to finish number 2. And I believe there are 2 or 3 other questions you have to do after that. Please make sure you get done all of them. You are going to update your flashcards with new vocab words. Remember, the words are percent, proportion, part, and whole. If you did not already make a vocab card for the word percent, please do that as well. So you should be up to about 4 vocab cards so far for chapter 2, And then when you're ready, you can begin chapter 2, lesson 4.